Good day. This is Felipe Salvosa. I'm the head of the journalism program of the University of Santo Tomas in Manila. And today I'd like to discuss a major issue confronting our region today, which is the South China Sea dispute. The Philippines belongs to a region in the world called Southeast Asia. And 10 countries in this region have formed a regional bloc called the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It's an important economic center. It has a big market, a combined population of 650 million people, and a combined GDP of $3.1 trillion. It is also a developing region with a per capita income of 4,755 US dollars. Now, the region is confronted by huge and powerful neighbors, and one of them is China. And China is actually a dialogue partner of ASEAN in its regular meetings held every year. It's a problem because China has, in recent years, asserted its dominance in the region. And a major flashpoint is this huge waterway called the South China Sea. In the northern part of the South China Sea are the Paracel Islands, which is being hotly contested by China and Vietnam, right here. In the southern part of the South China Sea are the Spratly Islands, and these group of islands are being claimed by the Philippines, Brunei, Vietnam, China, and also Taiwan. We must remember that Taiwan is the island where the nationalists fled when they lost to the communists during the Civil War in 1949, and therefore Taiwan's claim is similar to China's claim. And China, and all the other claimants occupied islands in the South China Sea. In the South China Sea, one-third of global maritime trade, equivalent to $3 trillion, pass every year. Another reason why it's hotly contested is because 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 11 billion barrels of oil are estimated to sit in the disputed waters. China has been grabbing territory from its neighbors for a long time. In 1995, Filipinos were shocked that one morning Chinese have built structures on what used to be a traditional fishing ground for Filipinos and other fishermen, and this is MISCHIEF Reef. As you can see, there are many octagonal structures constructed on the reef, and the Chinese flag flies over it. To try to solve this problem, ASEAN countries signed in 2002 a declaration on the conduct of parties in the South China Sea. They want to solve it peacefully and through negotiations. But that did not stop China from being aggressive in its claims to the South China Sea. In 2012, there was a big standoff at the Scarborough Shoal, which is very close to the Philippines. As you can see, Scarborough Shoal is closer to the Philippine island of Luzon than to the nearest Chinese island, which is Hainan. China sent vessels to Scarborough Shoal. The Philippines also sent vessels to the area. And with the intervention of the United States, both countries agreed to pull out. But the Chinese did not. So the shoal became occupied territory of China. Now, China has implemented a massive militarization of South China Sea. If you can see, this is what has happened to MISCHIEF Reef as of April 2020. There are now many structures there and even an airstrip, and this has been duplicated in many other islands of the Spratlys. The Philippines also occupies some islands in the Spratlys, actually 9 of them, and the biggest is the Pag-asa or Thitu Island. And this is a place where there is a Filipino community and a small airstrip. But this is nothing compared to the militarization conducted by China. As you can see, China can already land a military aircraft on this airstrip on Subi Reef. In response to the Scarborough Shoal standoff, the Philippines filed an arbitration case at the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague. You see, China's claim to the Spratlys is allegedly based on history. It claims that the South China Sea is a huge lake that is owned by China, and that this was mentioned in its history books. But the Permanent Court of Arbitration found that China never made the South China Sea a part of its map until 1948. In 1948, this map emerged, and this is called the 11 dash line map. As you can see, there are lines being drawn from the Gulf of Tonkin all the way to Borneo Island and all the way to the coasts of Palawan and Luzon, and then all the way to Taiwan. The map was revised in 2009, and the lines between the Gulf of Tonkin in between Hainan and Vietnam were removed, and there now remains 9 lines or 9 dashes. So it's now called the 9 dash line map. But as you can see, the 9 dash line map is parts of it are very close to the Philippines here. For example, these lines are very close to Palawan Island of the Philippines. And this claim overlaps with the Philippine claims, as we will see later on. In contrast, the Philippines has made the Scarborough Shoal part of its maps as early as 1734. This is what is known as the map of Pedro Murillo Velarde, published in 1734. And back then, the Scarborough Shoal was called Panakot, and it was very close to the province of Zambales in central Luzon Island. Now, what was the ruling of the Permanent Court of Arbitration? The PCA basically rejected the historic claims of China and said that China's historic claims have no basis, and if ever there were historic claims, these have been superseded by the 1982 treaty called the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. The UN Convention of the Law of the Sea grants archipelagic states like the Philippines an exclusive economic zone. What is this exclusive economic zone? This is a 200 nautical mile area from a country's territorial waters, which gives countries the exclusive right to exploit all resources within that area. So the PCA ruling was that China's claims have been extinguished by the 1982 treaty, which, by the way, China has signed. Although China did not really recognize the PCA proceedings, and it actually boycotted the proceedings and said that it would never recognize the ruling, which was handed down in July 2016. As you can see here, major part of the Spratly Islands fall within the 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. And in fact, some areas here enclosed by the exclusive economic zone have been identified as petroleum blocks or service areas that were supposed to be bidded out by the Philippine government for oil exploration companies. However, China protested these plans by the Philippines before the United Nations. As a response to the Chinese aggression, the Philippines actually renamed that part of South China Sea falling within its 200-mile exclusive economic zone as the West Philippine Sea. So when we refer to the portion of our territory that overlaps with the Chinese claims, we call that area the West Philippine Sea and not the South China Sea to reinforce the Philippine claim to that disputed waters. Now, while the Philippines won its arbitration case in China, we had a new president, Rodrigo Duterte, who is pursuing a policy of having closer economic ties with China. Duterte said that he will set aside the ruling in favor of more economic assistance, trade, and partnerships with China. Now, the problem is that despite the outbreak of coronavirus disease, China has taken advantage of the situation. Well, last year, even before the virus struck, there was a big incident near Reed Bank where a Philippine fishing boat was sunk by a Chinese vessel. And the boatmen were left uh, floating on the waters, and the Chinese vessel did not help the Filipino fishermen. And this caused a huge controversy in the Philippines. China has actually not apologized for the incident. Of course, in January 2020, there was the novel coronavirus outbreak that continues to rage. And despite that, in April 2020, a Vietnamese fishing boat was sunk by the China Coast Guard off the Paracel Islands in the northern part of the South China Sea. And then China made another provocative action by announcing the creation of two new districts. These are Nansha District, covering the Spratlys, and Shisha District, covering the Paracels. Now, I think the resolution of the South China Sea conflict will have to be viewed from the framework of the competition between two major powers, China and the United States. As we know, China is seeking to reassert its economic dominance in the region with the launching of the One Belt and One Road program, a massive infrastructure and economic program under President Xi Jinping. So, this program encompasses the old Silk Road from China all the way to Turkey in Europe, and also a separate road called the Maritime Road from Guangzhou in China all the way to um, the Malacca Strait, the Bay of Bengal, all the way to the Arabian Sea, the Middle East, and Egypt. Not to be outdone, the United States is pursuing an Indo Pacific strategy under President Donald Trump, in which India is part of the equation as some sort of a counterbalance to China. I think the solution to this dispute goes back to the ASEAN. I think ASEAN has to reassert itself and resist external pressure from superpowers like China and the United States, and it should try to encourage China to settle this matter peacefully rather than with violence and aggression, to prevent this area from becoming another flashpoint as the world struggles to find a solution to the coronavirus pandemic. Thank you for watching.